Welcome to Ignite Your Confidence for women in leadership who want to speak up and stand out. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Here you'll get all of the tips and tools that you need to stand out with unshakable confidence. Let's dive into today's episode. All righty. Oh my goodness. Well, I am thrilled to introduce Dara, and she's going to say more about herself. But first of all, welcome to this episode of Ignite Your Confidence. And today is going to be all about coaching someone with their introduction. And first of all, Dara and I met on Clubhouse, and she's going to tell a little bit more about that. But we met on Clubhouse. We got to know each other through another community of women, through the Women Who Spark Summit. And rather than me share much more about that, I'm going to turn it over to her, and she can share what she wants to say about her and how we met. So I'll turn it over to you, Dara.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Karen. It's great to be here. As you said, we met through Clubhouse, and when I heard you speak at the Women Who Spark Summit, it was what I do is I work with women in midlife who are feeling out of touch with what gives them a sense of purpose and meaning and value. And I do that through coaching and online courses and speaking. I also have a broader agenda, which is to help all of us of all ages, gender, everything, kick this whole false notion of midlife crisis to the curb. And as society defines it, as though it's like a flaw or a breakdown in us, when our sense of purpose and identity shifts, and that's not a crisis, it's a growth spurt. So when I look at kind of that broader agenda and how much my voice needs to be heard and my sense of, amplifying it and getting other people to join in, when I heard you speak, it was all the ways, it was clear to me that there are so many other ways I can be clear, louder, not literally, and really have people feel a part of a movement in this way. So with that, I said to you, how about we do this together in a way that it's not only helping me, but it's helping your audience and the larger population of women 40 plus to really hear this and see how they can amplify their voice. So.
Oh, I love that. So let's get to it. All right. So as you know, and I'll say to those listening as well, many of you have heard me on Clubhouse and you've heard this PPU model. So what we're going to do today is coach through. I'm going to talk through the PPU and then we'll coach Dara and see how that goes. And she has been so open and vulnerable to say, yeah, here I am. I'm happy to be coached.
Give it to me.
I love it so much. So the PPU stands for personal, professional, and unique. Now, taking it a step back, the point of it is to introduce yourself in a way so that you come across as focused, structured, and most importantly, your listener stays with you and they don't get lost or we don't start rambling. Like you already said, Dara, and I will say for myself, I'm a recovering rambler.
Mm-hmm.
So I have
Oh
learned to teach myself to focus and be as concise as possible. And whether you're on Clubhouse or whether you're in a networking meeting, any situation at all, we should always be ready with an introduction. But it's amazing how often people tell me that I coach, because typically when I coach someone, I will start them off on video and I'll give them a minute and say, hey, tell me about yourself. And it's amazing how most people go, well, I just wasn't prepared for that. Or and I say, what?
Yeah.
Intro? Like, you've been with yourself your whole life. That should be the one thing that you are prepared to talk about. And yet it really tends to throw people off. So it cracks me up. And yet I get it. And it's such a prominent thing that people say. It's worth having multiple probably podcasts on this. And that's why people keep coming back and saying, oh, I want to practice the PPU model, which seems to happen a lot on Clubhouse. So to focus on what that is. It's say something personal, professional, and unique.
Okay.
And the goal would be to keep it concise such that it stays under a minute. Most of the time, we can do it in about 15 to 30 seconds. And that, for anybody listening, if you haven't become aware yet, or if you don't know how often you talk when you give your intro, and I mean how often, how long, time yourself. Set a timer for a minute and see if you talk that long, or it might even feel like, well, wait a minute, that's not very long. But usually people's attention span starts waning after a minute if we don't know where the person's going. So have you ever had that happen to you, Dara, by the way? Any
Um,
feeling?
Absolutely. I think this is going to be so educational and amusing for your listeners because there's like a huge piece that I'm just going to mess up entirely. So
Well, no worries to be worried
my
about.
heart's in it. My heart, I love you all, but
We're all in this together, right?
yeah, yeah.
All right. So PPU, say something personal, professional, unique. So as I typically do on Clubhouse, I will model this for you also,
Okay.
Dara. I know you know this, but just to get your head back in the game, so what it might sound like is this. Hi, I'm Karen Laus. I'm originally from Minneapolis, but now I live in San Francisco. Professionally, I work with corporate women or entrepreneurs over 40 who want to overcome self-doubt and speak with confidence and clarity. Something a little bit unique about me that not everybody knows is that I had a dream, well, have had a dream of living in Manhattan, but there was a few years ago that I thought, well, I don't need to live there for a long time. Let's just rent an apartment. So I spent a month there in October 2017 for my 50th birthday month and
Oh,
celebrated the entire time and fulfilled that dream. So that's a little bit about me. So there you go. Now, I didn't time that, but I'm guessing that that was probably around 30 seconds, something like that. Now, the other thing that you can keep in mind that you can change it up. I don't always say that. Sometimes I say I'm the last of 9 kids, which is a very quick, unique one. It's also personal. You could argue and say, yeah, but isn't that the personal under the personal category? And sometimes your personal can also be your unique. You can still say where you're from, which I think is a good default for the personal, because most people like that connection through geographic orientation. But
yeah.
and you could say something else that's a little bit unique about you that isn't that unique, or that people wouldn't necessarily see coming if they saw you. So that's another way to think about the unique. Is this isn't something you like, for example, and I will tell you another one.
Yeah.
Most people wouldn't know that I used to drive a Greyhound passenger sized bus back in my 20s when I was traveling in the performing group up with people. So
No, you're right.
would you say that's unexpected, Dara?
Yes, yes. Oh, that's beautiful. That,
All right, so let's get to you.
okay.
So you want, do you want anything that you need in advance, Dara, before
A
setting this up?
question. I have a question, and I wonder if your listeners also would have it, which is, how do you feel? I use my hands all
Mhm,
the time. You know, it's almost this, I feel I am enunciating better. What's your feeling about like hands or body language and whether it distracts from ads? Any thoughts about that?
absolutely.
Okay.
Definitely ads. So it's one of the components of energy. And for example, there's technically 4 components of energy as far as how we come across related to communication. One of those is movement, which of course we're not necessarily talking about here. That's more when you're in person and you
Okay.
can move, if you think about a stage or even a conference room. The other one is voice, which of course we're going to talk about today. The other energy component is smile, facial expressions overall.
Okay.
And then the other one is gestures. So you definitely want, if you can use all 4 of those at your just like basically they're all at your disposal. So think about energy as a way to engage your audience. And one of those is definitely using your hands. Now, part of the problem with gesturing is that people use too many of them and they never rest. We don't have enough variety, whether it's in our voice, in our pausing, in our movement, in our facial expressions, in our gestures. It becomes a pattern that also then over time could come across as monotone.
Got it.
So
Yep, makes
we're
so much sense.
constantly like this, then there's no difference. All of a sudden,
Right.
those distractions, those gestures are actually going to be distracting. Now, obviously, most people are listening to this podcast, so I want to make sure that I also acknowledge that Dara and I right now are on video, but even so, the gestures are very helpful as far as adding to your energy level.
Great.
So
Wow.
that's an important thing. In fact, I think about it when you're on the phone with somebody, you can tell when they have energy, typically in their voice, but why not help that along with using more gestures? Because if that's how you normally talk anyway, which you had said, Dara, that it is for you, you use quite a few gestures, then why not use it? And that's going to help you become, first of all, you'll feel more natural and authentic, but it will also bring across more energy. I think about when I worked at a call center, I mean, we could tell when people were smiling when we listened back to the
Aw,
recordings. So, and the gestures help too.
that's great. You can hear their smile. I love that.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, let's hear your intro. Okay. So for everybody listening, I'm going to time her as well.
Okay.
So we'll look at all of these things and then we'll go from there. So you let me know, Dara, whenever you are ready.
See, I tried to put this off with questions. It didn't work. Okay. All
Good
right.
point. Thank you for calling that out.
All right. I'm going to do
All
it.
right, everybody. So here's the PPU and no pressure at all, Dara. That's why we're
Okay.
here.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dara Goldberg, and I am from Philadelphia. Currently live there with 2 kids, 2 cats, 1 dog, and 1 husband. And professionally, I work with women in midlife who are going through a time where they feel they've lost their sense of purpose and meaning and value and are in a place where the emotions are running high. And so managing the emotions and helping to kind of figure out who they are now is what I do. And I do it through coaching, I do it through speaking, I do it through an upcoming online course that I'm really excited about. And while my profession is important to me and knowing a little bit about me, I would say something that perhaps distinguishes me is that I've always wanted to be the lead singer in a rock and roll band, but I can't carry a tune. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
I love it. Okay, first of all, timing wise, that was 1 minute and 8 seconds.
Oh no.
So that's okay. No, but it's good
Okay.
awareness. So number one, awareness, by the way, that's what we always want to go for. How
Okay.
is this helping us become more aware? And then I want to also celebrate. First of all, that was right around a minute. So I'd say, I would even say like, yay,
Okay.
that's a good thing, rather
Yay.
than like
Yeah.
whatever it was, 8 seconds over. We don't have to be that legalistic about it.
Oh, good.
But first of all, I always like to start with what you did well, of course, because first of all, it flowed so beautifully. It just rolled off of your tongue. So clearly you've done this before. It felt organized, structured, and it didn't feel like you were hemming and hawing, or, a lot of times people are, Now you did have a couple of ums in there. So I also want to acknowledge that. So the goal in that case would be to pause instead. Now, I know that's easier said than done. I mean, let's face it, I do live in reality. I also have had to work on my filler words. And it seems like as soon as you get rid of one, then another one comes up.
Okay.
So it's kind of like that, what is it, that carnival game, whack-a-mole, where you get one down and then another pops
Oh,
up,
yep.
another pops up. You go, ah.
Those
So
ums.
the reason why I bring that up is because, of course, in an ideal world, it would be, well, just pause. But I want to acknowledge that it's not easy to change habits. But that's where number one, I mean, obviously, you know this, Dara, also as a coach in your profession, that habits don't just automatically change.
Right.
There's also things under that a lot of the times. Now, I'm not talking about that with you today, but what I do want to focus on is reminding you and anybody else here that's listening, make sure you record yourself so then you can start hearing these habits that you have.
Okay.
And a lot of times
Love
these
that.
ums come up when we don't even realize that we're saying them. Because I am curious, were you aware?
Not at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, see, that to me is a huge win, because usually what we do, right, is we criticize ourselves. Like even your immediate reaction was, when I said it was a minute and 6 seconds. My
Yeah.
goal was not to create meaning around that. It was just simply, here's what it was. Here are the facts. And that's why for anybody listening, when you do record yourself or you work with a coach, me or somebody else, we can help you to look at that and go, hey, that's awareness, which is gold. Then it's okay, what do we do about it?
Mm-hmm.
And the payoff of the pause is actually so rich, because not only does it help us to replace or remove the ums or ahs or whatever filler word a person might have, but it also allows us to show even more control.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're at ease, then people listening to us are going to feel at ease. And more importantly, they're not going to be wondering, why is she hemming and hawing? Why is she saying, or, oh, she must be unsure. She must be nervous. There's all these things that a listener might be thinking about. But that would be one suggestion for you. I want
That's
to come
great.
back. Yeah. How does that land for you, by the way?
I think that's incredibly helpful because part of it is, as I was listening to just now, I don't I don't want it to be an entirely out of body experience, right? Like what I hear you saying is make it me, like keep it in my body, right? And I think that is what will help with the sense of, or help me have greater awareness. Because
Mhm.
the minute it becomes this, I'm acting or it's not me, I'm not there anymore. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yes, it does. It's so
Ooh,
important to, yeah, go ahead.
I just used uh, a term that I learned from you
Which, does
is
that make sense?
yes, yeah,
Say what you learned. Tell me more about that.
that I don't know that it makes you lose credibility, right? Because what I'm saying matters, or what I'm asking does make sense, right? So
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
that what it is? I'm like
Yes.
doubting my own ability, if you will.
Yeah, it can come across that way. I understand that you might not actually be feeling that way, but it can come across that you're unsure of yourself, you're questioning your abilities, and that makes it come across obviously less powerful with less strength for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad that you brought that up. That's a whole other one.
I know. And I learned that from you even the other day. And I was so aware of how many times I do it after that. I was like, oh my goodness. Like with my husband, I do it all the time. And I know I make sense with him.
So great. That is, and you know what? Say that one more
I
time.
always make sense when I talk to him, of course.
Of course, of course. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so let's get back to, we talked about the pod. So again, celebrating the flow, how it went really well as far as one to the other. You got through each very beautifully, the personal, professional, and unique. So I want to celebrate that. I also want to say, excuse me, that your pace was really good. It wasn't
Oh,
too fast, it wasn't too slow. So that was great.
okay.
I'm kind of all over the place a little bit, because I want to go back to the pause for a minute, because one of the things that can happen is that we can focus on the fact that we always say I see too many people going, I'm saying all the time. Well, the problem is our subconscious mind, all we hear is So instead of saying don't say for example, I was coaching somebody the other day, and she said, I have post-its all over my wall that don't say like, and whatever. And I said, well, The problem is you're sabotaging yourself because you keep wanting to, you see those words. So of course you're going to keep saying them.
That's
So
so funny.
isn't
Yeah.
that funny?
Yeah.
So what you want to do is focus on the behavior you want to replace those with. In other
Okay.
words, pause and maybe come up with a mantra. I am a person who perfectly pauses. That could be a wonderful way to deal with it. And in fact, it's funny because I did have a client who said, "Oh, I'm on the phone, literally always saying, oh, I'm tally marking them." And I said, "Well, that's not the same thing." I said, "That's not going to work. But what would be an affirmation or a mantra that you could say?" And so he did actually start using that. I am a person who perfectly pauses, or who pauses
That's
perfectly.
so that's so good because that's the mind shift, right? And
Exactly.
you talk all about like you have to start with the mindset, right?
Yes, yes, it's so true. So that is another idea around the pauses. The
Love it.
other thing, and here's where I want to go to, another thing I would suggest for you, Dara, is to project your voice more. Because you mentioned offline that sometimes your voice quivers a little bit. And so I noticed it here, and I've noticed it with you in the past when I've heard you before, that you sound a little tentative. So that projection will help because your pause is great, but breathing from that diaphragm and really pushing out your voice will make a big difference. It'll help support the breath because it feels like you're not supported.
And that I can feel like what you're saying totally resonates because I do feel there's this, fluctuation. Even though I love what I'm saying and I feel so strongly, it doesn't, like you're saying, it doesn't project that way. So
Mhm.
that's great. And it's really, you're saying from like pulling from the diaphragm. Is that what you're?
Yes, yes. And that's that muscle right around your stomach that we don't even, most of us, realize that we're using. But our voice is our greatest instrument. So instead of breathing from, say, it sounds sort of funny to say from your throat, but for example, when I tell people to take a deep breath, a lot of times their shoulders go way up because they're breathing from their lungs, although lungs and throat, of course, your breath comes through your lungs, but it's supported at a deeper level through your diaphragm. So that's where you want to be thinking about, okay, that's where I'm accessing my voice using almost your entire body. Most of us think about our voice as an isolated part of ourselves, or we just don't even think about it. Let's be honest. Most people don't even think
Right.
about this. Unless you've been vocally trained, you're not really thinking about these things. So this is why we bring these up, of course, in a coaching session like this, so that you can access that.
I love that.
One other thing I wanted to say that you do beautifully, which I completely forgot to say right away, is your warmth. You have incredible warmth in how you come across through your voice, tone, as well as how you come across with your facial expressions. Now, I know most people are listening to this, so they're not actually watching, but boy, you can feel Dara's warmth over the phone, period. But seeing her in person, it's even more. You just light up and you make people feel so heard, seen, and known. So that's a real gift that you have.
That is wonderful. See what a wonderful, warm coach you are. Like
Oh, thank you,
you're,
Dara.
I mean,
Thank
you exude the authenticity too.
Oh,
And
thank
I
you.
couldn't work with someone who, didn't have that expertise and quality. I mean, I just love how you seem to understand, and your experience is the intersection between the pragmatics of this, or is that the word?
Yeah.
And the emotional component. I mean, it's like you even described it before we went online, the intertwining between the two, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that very much. That means a lot to me. One last thing that I want to share
Okay.
is the epidemic that most of us have. And you did it as well by when you said your name. You said your name with upspeak. So it was Dara Goldberg versus Dara Goldberg. Now, I bring this up because it's not something that most people think about. We have habits as human beings. There's patterns that we have in the world as well. And most people, when they introduce themselves, it becomes a big run-on sentence. And just to clarify for everybody, what upspeak is when you say a statement, but you end it with a question mark or a comma, as opposed to with declarative conviction, declarative tone, vocal conviction, however you want to say it. And essentially, you want to say it like you mean it. And yet what happens is, let's just face it, when, for example, look at this in a voicemail situation. Sometimes people will just say, like, if you're listening to my voicemail, well, I have changed it, but it it could sound like this. Hi, I'm Karen Laus, and I haven't, or no, I'm now doing my introduction. Let me back up. Voicemail, you know how it is where you go,
Yeah.
I am Karen, you've reached I'm not available, but please leave a message. And the only time we actually land with the period is at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you, Dara, I will never forget this. My first coach 20 some years ago totally stood out to me because her voicemail was exactly what I'm talking about we want to do. And it was so different from everybody. She said, hi, you've reached Michelle Lisenberry. And then there was this pause, and I went, whoa, like,
That's
I'm going to
so
keep listening.
good.
It was just so different. And as
Yeah.
human beings, we are conditioned to look for patterns or just notice patterns, get into patterns. That's why these
Mm-hmm.
habits are so hard. And then when something disrupts that, it really stands out. So I want everybody to stand out with unshakable confidence. And this is one of the ways that we can do that, is simply to say our name with a period. Now, it might sound weird. People still might be going, wait, what are you talking about? So I'll model it quickly in an introduction. So instead, before, you probably didn't even notice that I said my name with a period. But if I didn't, I would say it like this. Hi, my name is Karen Laus, and I'm originally from Minneapolis, but now I live in San Francisco. Versus, hi, my name is Karen Laus. I know it is.
Right. You're
I'm
not asking
originally,
me to confirm.
right, exactly.
That's what it sounds like.
I
That's great.
know. I'm originally from Minneapolis, but now I live in San Francisco. So you can hear that nice period. So you did land throughout, Dara, which was awesome. So you had sentences throughout where you had the periods, but your name, it was subtle. It wasn't Goldberg, but it was subtle.
Yep. I
So
can, now that you say it, I can hear it. And what I think I need to just say is, I know my name is Dara Goldberg.
yes,
Like, in my head, I can feel confident that my name is indeed Dara Goldberg. I'm never going to forget that, Karen. That's great advice. You know,
uh,
the other thing
yeah.
I was thinking with your advice is that what you're also invariably doing for me, but for your clients overall, is you're helping us become better listeners too. And
Ooh,
that's a critical piece, because the minute I have pause, like this whole greater calm, right? And the pause piece, I can also, not just when I'm speaking, but when I'm listening, I'm calmer and I'm conveying a level of active listening. I don't know, I was immediately seeing that you're touching on both when you coach people.
that is so great that you said that. It's so interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. So that's wonderful. Thanks for coaching me back.
Yeah, just feedback. I
Yeah,
love
that's
this feedback.
wonderful. Oh
Okay.
my goodness. Well, I hope, well, before you, well, you already said, I was going to say, before we wrap this up, do you want to say your name one last time?
Okay, now I'm
Like you mean
speaking.
it.
Okay, I'm Dara Goldberg. Um, Hi, I'm Dara Goldberg.
Yes, there it is. There
Good,
you
okay.
Now, if anybody's listening to this going, well, I can do that, I'm just going to tell you, try it. Because I have had people go, oh, I can do that. I have had people that are public speaking coaches not being able to say their name with a period. So I want everybody to know here, like, none of us is above this. And I have been guilty as charged too. And I have practiced for years to get this where I am with that declarative tone. So I've actually sat sometimes with teams of people where I make them all say their name multiple times because a lot of times, like we got to get the basics down. And it
Yeah.
took me one time, I had an executive, it took 11 times for the name to get right. I kept standing behind the camera. Nope, nope.
Oh, they loved you.
Yes,
That's good
exactly.
though.
Well, Dara, I am so happy that you joined today. And for those of you that would love to reach Dara, I'd love Dara, tell us where we can get in touch with you and how we can learn more about you.
Thank you. I am on Instagram all the time at Dara Does Midlife. I'm on Clubhouse perhaps too much. And my handle is Dara Does Midlife. And on Clubhouse, I run a room. It's called Midlife Musings, and it's for women in midlife. We cover all different topics. It's every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And then I always love when people reach out directly. It's Dara at daragoldberg.com.
Wonderful. Well,
So
I am
thank you,
so
Karen.
honored that you thought of this, by the way. This was your idea. And I also want to give credit to Heather Feisen, who is my web designer and also was a consultant for me related to my podcast. And she also had said that would be cool. And at that time, it was sort of a, oh, yeah, that's nice. Maybe someday.
Too
But
busy.
you really came forward and said, I think this would be great. And I so appreciate that, Dara, because this is simply one thing for anybody listening that you could use me for related to a coaching session. And specifically, I've got my online course coming up for those of you that are in my community. You already know that, but I want to remind you that because you are in my community, you can get the early bird price, which is 50% off, and it goes up on May 18th. So if you want to do this online course, we've got 7 modules that is essentially everything that I know for communication, from your personal brand, how you want people to experience you, all the way through executive presence, content, how to make a powerful ask, how to promote yourself with ease, which I know we had talked about, Dara, as something that you believe as well as I, excuse me, as well as I do, that a lot of women have a challenge with that. So anyway, lots of things in this course, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you further, Dara, about maybe more sessions like this, because this was so fun.
Oh, I loved
So
it,
I
Karen.
appreciate your time today, Dara.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap of another episode of Ignite Your Confidence. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Thank you so much for listening. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast faster, and it certainly helps me. If you're interested in more tips and tools around confidence, please join me over in my Facebook group called Ignite Your Confidence with Karen Laus. Remember, you too can stand out with unshakable confidence.